And you ever wonder where the fish go in the middle of the daytime or when the blue get up there? A lot of times they get under mats or any type of canopy. I'm in the middle of a string of tournaments here and I've been punching exclusively. So in this video, I want to show you how to punch, the equipment I use, and what I look for. We've been catching some big ones here lately, and it's a technique that catches a lot of big fish, especially in the springtime, especially in the fall. Here's my setup, this is what I do, and this is what I'm gonna look for. All right, here's my basic setup, and this is right out of my rod box here. Like I said, I'm in the middle of some punching tournaments, a lot of slop tournaments, and it's a real basic setup. But in order for you to increase your chances of catching an 8-pounder in a tournament or a 7-pounder in a tournament, you have to have the right equipment. Starts with the rod. You hear all the time, a punching rod is just a heavy flipping stick. That's kind of true, but you need a punching rod that's got some give to it. It's gonna be on the heavier side of medium heavy. So you want kind of a moderate action rod. This is a Megabass Valkyrie rod. It's a 7.5 footer, 65-pound braid. Don't ever go under 65 pound. 50 is too light, 80 is real heavy, it gets real kind of thick. 65 is just perfect. I know a lot of guys flip with 8 and punch with 8, but all day long, that 8 feet of rod is just, it becomes real fatiguing. I like a 7.6 where I can really pendulum swing the 1.5 ounce weight or ounce weight or whatever it is all day long without fatigue. This setup really starts with a bobber stop. I use a Eagle Claw bobber stop here, and these were originally designed and they still work very good for stopping bobbers when you're fishing for crappie, panfish, whatever it might be. But some smart fishermen 15 years ago decided that we could use these just to kind of stop those 1 ounce, 2 ounce weights from sliding all the way up your line. So I kind of like to use 2. Got 2 bobber stops up there. I got about 10 inches of line out. So let's get into really the rigging of this. Again, punching, in my opinion, is from 1 ounce all the way up to about 2 ounces. Anything greater than 2 ounces is just too heavy. So that's a 2 ounce weight. That's a 1 ounce weight. And my favorite, a 1.5 ounce weight. No matter where I go in the country, a lot of times I'll just have that 1.5 ounce weight rigged up. This rod's gonna be rigged and ready to go anytime there's some type of canopy. 1.5 ounce tungsten sinker, don't use lead, use tungsten. So after the bobber stops there, just slip in, real simple. 1.5 ounce tungsten weight. And then this is kind of optional, but I always use a punch skirt. It's a Delta thing we did, you know, back 10 plus years ago. It's just a bead with a skirt on it. It helps add bulk to the bait. So just kind of grab your line and go through that bead there and apply the skirt onto the line. It's almost like it's almost like a jig type there. So punch skirt, and then the hook, super important hook. This is the one I've been using exclusively here. It's the Eagle Claw Laser Sharp. It's a needle point hook. This hook does not flex. My favorite feature about this particular hook is it's got a plastic keeper, and that is so key to keeping your punch bait on in and out of these mats. And there's a lot of slop, a lot of obstacles you're pulling this thing through, so you need an extra stout bait keeper on there, and that plastic one's not going anywhere. So why a laser sharp needle point hook instead of a Trokar flipping hook? Well, I use 2. I use a needle point hook when there's a lot of big fish around. I know I'm doing real heavy slack line hook sets. I like that needle point. If you're a type of person that likes to flip in there and likes flipping along, you know, nice and slow, real methodical, and you do just kind of a lean back hook set, go with the Trokar hook. That's the sharpest hook you could possibly buy. And it's just so sharp that it doesn't require much oomph to get through the plastic and to get through the bait and into the fish's mouth. A lot of times you'll hook them right in the bone and they do not come off. So I kind of use 2 depending on the type of fishery. And if you use them softer than normal rod, then go with that Trokar hook. So today we're using the Laser Sharp needle point. So after the punch skirt, we'll go with just a 4/0 Laser Sharp needle point hook, and it's a snelled knot, so real easy. Hook point up, line goes in perpendicular here, create a loop, bring about 2.5 3 inches of line, create a loop, and just grab that line and just in 4 wraps around the shank of the hook right above the bait keeper there, grab the tag in through that loop and just pull her tight. And that is just as simple as that. And what that does is it creates a perpendicular line tie there. And with this setup, every time that fish grabs that, you know, that rig there, look at that hook, see how it's loaded there? Every time a fish wraps its lips around it and you go to set the hook, it kind of has that gaff motion, boom, 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 right into the fish's mouth. So that just helps land a few extra fish. So that's the setup there. 1.5 ounces of in and out and in and out. So 4/0 hook. I use 3 different hook sizes, and you need to consider that with the type of bait that's around. If there's a lot of bluegill around, a 4 4.25 inch bait is probably the staple. General rule of thumb, if you're using like a 3 inch or 3.5 inch style bait when the bait's real small, or you know, it's a high pressured situation, 3/0 hook, 3 inch bait, 4/0 hook, 4 inch bait, 5/0 hook, 5 inch bait, and so on. But a 4/0 hook is a real nice mid-range. And today I'm punching just a craw here. This is a bottle shrimp. I love punching this bait because it's slender. It's real slender. And as you shake it in there, those legs are real heavy. It's kind of like a craw Senko. So pay attention to the type of fishery it is. If there's a lot of bluegill smacking, old school creature baits work really well. Been, you know, flipping these 4.25 inch creature baits forever. Sometimes I'll go to just a 3.5 inch creature bait, you know, in high pressured situations or when the bait fish are real small. Or if you notice real small crawdads in your live well, things like that. If you're having trouble getting through some of the floating vegetation, go with a smaller, slimmer profile like the 3.5 inch baits or the real slim type, you know, bottle shrimps and the like. So, but day in and day out, you see a lot of people flipping these 4.25 inch creature baits, and that's really what started this whole punching thing. So now that we have everything rigged up here with my 4/0 hook and my bottle shrimp here, it's just simple Texas rig from there. You're Texas rigging, you're going over that awesome bait keeper there. And you know, like my tag in, it doesn't matter. I mean, that's a long tag in my opinion. I'll never do that for a spinner bait, but for punching, it really doesn't matter. So just kind of Texas rig over it. Really important step here when you're punching. So instead of texposing it like we will when we're worm fishing or tube fishing or something like that, I really want to make sure that that hook point, I'm just barely putting it in that bottle shrimp. Boom, just barely putting it in there. In other words, I want more meat in front of the hook point instead of behind the hook point. And that's simply because the vegetation I'm fishing is real thick. So I don't want that hook point creeping out and snagging up over there. So I want it very, very weedless. Again, this is all heavy equipment, heavier than normal rod. It's got some give to it. But I want that hook point protected really, really nice. These are ultra sharp hooks. They don't bend out. When I get that bite, lean into them, slackline them, whatever you want to do. But a lot of times you'll get them right in the snout, right where it counts. So that's kind of the setup. That's my equipment here. I didn't mention that's an 8-to-1 gear ratio reel. I like that 8-to-1 just because when I'm pitching in and out real quick, I can cover water quickly when I'm fishing a tournament. So that's the technical side of it. Let's get into what I look for. Hopefully we can catch a few on here. We've been catching a lot of fish here over the last couple weeks. Let me show you what to look for. So just like with any other bass pattern, you really want to find where and how these fish are positioned. So a lot of times, if here's the dam, I really want to work main lake areas. So in other words, I'm looking for overhanging matted vegetation areas off the main lake here. So this is the main channel. If I establish a type of characteristic like a flat, like here, like these little areas just off the main lake, little coves, then I'll just go ahead and duplicate them. So like these couple coves here, if I get a bite in there, then I'll just run coves off the main lake looking for these punch fish. And you know, as the day goes on, I'll start going into some of these creeks, and if these fish are halfway back, relating to the mats halfway back into the creek, then I'll only fish the mats halfway in the backs of the creeks going up and down the lake. So, and I'll also check the very backs of them depending on the time of year. You know, early spring they'll be in the very backs, later in the fall they'll be in the very back. So pay attention on your map, you know, where the mats are that are holding the fish. But you got to check them all. So start on the main lake, fish the main lake points, the main lake flats, all the matted vegetation through there. One really cool pattern worth mentioning is the trash mats. When you have a big rain that comes in, all that tan bark and all the wood chippings and all the dead leaves and things form up towards the tops of the lake. So anything that provides a canopy that bluegill could get under is a good little spot for a big fish to hang out. So pay attention to that and always listen to the smacking. Those are the bluegill eating the bugs off the surface, whether it be matted pads, matted hyacinth, matted cheese, whatever it is. Always look for those clues of bait fish underneath those mats. And a lot of times those will be the areas that have the biggest fish. So we just pull off the main lake here, and this is just a backwater. We're at the mouth of it, so I always like to start kind of at the mouths of some of these creeks. And the first thing I came up to is an isolated patch, whether it be spring, summer, fall, wintertime. We always want isolation. You know, if it's an isolated laydown, an isolated dock, an isolated mat. Basically, isolated mats like this provide, you know, 360 degrees of opportunity for a big fish to swim into. It could swim off the main lake into this mat, the back of this creek into this mat. So whenever we have isolation, that is just an ambush point for a big fish to pull up to. So I'll never pass up an isolated mat, especially at the mouth of a creek like this. When I get done fishing this mat here, I'm just gonna go to the bank and just go down the bank and just look for little intricacies, little clues that tip me off, like bait fish, like points, like depressions. And by the end of the day, by the end of this punching session, you know, I'll have a good idea of whether they're on the points or the cuts or the drains or the high spots. We got to check them all. So we're going to start out right here. Right here, we have matted hyacinth. It's an isolated patch. Hyacinth has got a nice root system down beneath it that a lot of crawfish hang out and a lot of bluegill hang out in. So whenever I have hyacinth, that's a good thing. And here's the approach, the retrieve. I mean, we just put the trolling motor in the water, 1.5 ounce weight. You just kind of swing, pitch it in. The important thing here is to make sure you've got enough line out there to kind of follow that 1.5 ounce weight in there. If there's 4 feet of water underneath there, I'm gonna 4 feet of line out and just kind of follow it in. You just kind of jig it up and down and up and down and let the fish tell you the retrieve they want. A lot of times they'll bite it on the fall, sometimes they like it shaked. So whether I'm going down, just down the bank, a row of matted vegetation or isolated spot like this, I always want to look for the points. There's a point right here, there's a point right here. If wind's blowing in it, that's even better. The weather's changing, I'm always looking for points here. So I'm gonna work the outsides a foot or two in, and then I'm gonna go and flip right in the middle, right in the heart of some of these patches like this. And again, you'll get a bite either on the edges or inside of it, and that just gives you information to move to the next patch. If I get a bite right in the middle, then the very next patch, I'll start fishing right in the middle. But generally speaking, if you have current or if you have wind, they're gonna be on the current or wind side of some of these patches. So this water has kind of got this tannic color to it. And to me, you know, I fish all around, and tannic water means a lot of vegetation, a lot of decaying vegetation. So whenever we have a tannic water or like a root beer colored water, brown colored water, or even just, you know, a mud influx, whatever it is, go with your black and blues, your June bugs. That's why I have that on there. I like to match the punch weight to my bait, so it's real nice and tidy. And also keep in mind, the darker the water, the darker it is underneath those mats, so the darker the bait. And on the contradictory side of that, in clear water, you could still punch big fish in clear water. You just want to go to your green pumpkins, more of your bluegill, your watermelon reds, green pumpkins, your browns and your blues. So so keep that in mind too. Just match kind of the color of your punch setup to the water color and the type of fish you're fishing. But generally speaking, clear the water, the more green pumpkin you want to go. Darker the water, the more black and blue you want to go. You know, as I flip into these hyacinth mats here, you know, if it gets hung up on the surface or in those leaves, I'll just kind of shake it to where it reposition that 1.5 ounce weight, and then I'm gonna follow it in. As it falls, I want it to fall quickly, boom, quick. And that just basically gives that fish an opportunity to either leave it alone or get it right now. And if a big fish is up there, it's up there feeding. It's up there to crash on bluegill and crawfish. So 8 out of 10 times I flip into a mat, 8 out of 10 times, those big fish will bite it, boom, on the initial drop. So you gotta let it fall quickly. and 1 out of 10 times, the fish will bite it as you flip in there. It doesn't quite get it after the first kind of up and down, but you just kind of want to jig it there. And if you think about it, it's coming up off the bottom, back into the top of the mat, and then back down slowly. Typically when it's real cold, the fish really like that retrieve a lot better. So you flip it in there, just kind of real slowly up and down, up and down. So 1 out of 10 times you'll see that. And then also kind of a rare kind of occurrence, but it works really, really well. Kind of an old Delta trick we used to do. Again, if you think about that root system in that floating vegetation, I kind of flip in there, kind of shake it, shake it. Okay, I'm at the base of the hyacinth where that root system is. I want to keep that punch bait right in that root system. So as it punches through, I know I'm in the water underneath the surface, but I'm just shaking it 2 or 3 inches below the surface there, and I'm kind of jigging it in that root system. A lot of times later in the year, fish will look up and feed up into that root system. So that's just a perfect presentation there. So that when you actually slow down and shake it in the root system there, some of your biggest bites come that way as well. But more times than not, 80% of the time, they'll bite it on the initial flip. But you got to play with all the different techniques. You know, as I look through here, you know, I don't know what kind of vegetation this is, but it's got a root system that goes all the way to the bottom. And that's a good point and worth mentioning. I'm always looking for transitions in fishing. So transitions, whether it be a clay bank to a rock bank or a viney vegetation to a floating vegetation, that provides an opportunity, just contrast, something different for a big bass to hang out right on that transition from a root system to floating stuff. So always look for 2 different types of vegetation, whether it be hydrilla, where the hydrilla meets milfoil, where the hydrilla meets the hyacinth, where the duck seed meets the milfoil. Always look for that type of transition. A lot of big fish hang in that stuff. So I've got a whole creek to work with here. I hope these tips help you the next time you decide to go punching. Again, keep in mind, look for those clues. Look for the bluegill smacking. Look for those little current areas. Look for those points. Isolation is key. And definitely keep in mind the depth underneath these mats. So try to duplicate it, duplicate, duplicate, duplicate. And when they bite, set the hook hard and winch them in. Until next time, we'll see you.